Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. Yesterday, in a front-page story, the Business Standard said that the response to Kailash Satyarti's Nobel Peace Prize is muted. In a leader, the paper claimed the reaction from India Inc. is disturbing. Others have said the award has political overtones and could be a useful handle to tar the Made in India label. Are these apprehensions justified, or are they mistaken and possibly misplaced? That's the big debate tonight. My guests are the managing editor of the Business Standard, Rahul Jacob, the well-known pioneer columnist Swapan Das Gupta, the director of advocacy of Save the Children, Shireen Vakil Miller, one of India's foremost sociologists, Professor Ashish Nandi, and the former Secretary General of FICCI, Rajiv Kumar. Rahul Jacob, yesterday your paper, The Business Standard, had a front-page story and a leader which said that the response in India to Kailash Satyarti's Nobel Prize was muted and nothing like the rapturous festivities when Amartya Sen won the award in 1998. What are the sort of things that you believe are missing this time around?
Well, to say it's muted is in fact probably being kind. I think it's been ambivalent to sometimes downright hostile. There have been editorials today equating NGOs with terrorists. I think the issue is we see ourselves as a country of great software developers, of economists. Child labor is something we'd rather distance ourselves from. It's not part of the Indian self-image of 2014. So this is a little bit of an embarrassment as far as the, even journalists, to my surprise, have either scrambled to discover who this man is or not written very much about him.
Ashish Nandi, let's pick up on that first point. To what extent is the response muted? And I'm using the word muted because that was the word in the headline in the Business Standard yesterday. To what extent is the response muted? A, because child labour is not an appealing subject, and B, and more importantly, it's a subject that embarrasses us and we don't know how to handle that awkward issue.
Not all of us. It is those youngsters who do the main bulk of blogging. These are young Indians, mostly first generation Indians in the first world, who take most avidly to this kind of issues. And anything which calls attention to the darker side of Indian society, politics and culture, they have a tendency to feel uncomfortable about it because they think that humiliates them in their foreign context. And somehow or other they identify these kind of awards or this kind of achievements with the enemies of India.
So what you're really pointing out is this time around the bloggers, the Twitters and the Facebook people are completely silent, and they're silent because child labour is an issue that embarrasses them. They don't know how to handle it.
That's right.
Rajiv Kumar, the Business Standard reports that no leading industry chamber issued a statement to congratulate Satyarthi on Friday. The paper adds that when it contacted FICCI, the response it got was that FICCI would be willing to issue a comment if the paper asked for it. Now, you've been Secretary General of FICCI. What do you make of that response from your former organization?
I think that's pathetic. Even as Secretary General of FICCI, I had made it a point to, in some sense, request the industry to launch a campaign against child labor in India. That's one thing that the industry, I had insisted, must sort of stick its flag on and take it up. But I'm afraid I didn't find a response because child labor it was common among industry, the trading community, etc. And as somebody said, it's something that we don't like to admit. But as a civilized society, and as the industry which is proud of being a leading force in that,
okay,
I think it is quite shocking that the Indian industry has not taken up more steps to root this evil out.
Now, Swapan Das Gupta, you've gone one step further. In your column in The Pioneer yesterday, you write that Satyarthi and Malala didn't receive the Nobel Peace Prize because of their good works. The choice was dictated by other considerations, not all of which are flattering to India. And then you add, the child labour issue is a useful handle to tar the Made in India label. Do you really believe that the award was given to Satyarthi at least partly to bring India down a notch or two, as your last paragraph suggests?
Well, Karan, there are two issues, two very distinct issues involved here. The first one is the recognition that those who give an award always do so because it corresponds to their idea, in this case, of what is good. Now, what is good and what is desirable in their opinion here boil down to the question of they were upholding human rights. Now, in the case of Malala Yousafzai, there was this case that she had taken on a robust fight against the Talibanization of particular sections of Pakistani society. In the case of Mr. Satyarthi, the issue was that he had taken on child labor. Now, the issue was, why did child labor suddenly become an issue there? Because they wanted to twin various issues. There were various hyphenations involved. There was the human rights hyphenation, there was the Hindu-Muslim hyphenation, there was the Indo-Pakistan hyphenation. So, per se, there was it is not to deny that Mr. Satyarthi has done very good work. But for the Nobel Prize Committee to recognize it meant that it fits into an agenda and it fits into a stereotype of what India is really about.
Let me put that to you.
And that it fits into the, let me just add one sentence.
Yeah.
That it constitutes a very, very important input in the larger perception that there is, in the Make in India issue, there is a large degree of unethical labor practices involved. And therefore the image of India must necessarily be also tempered by a recognition that India is a pre-modern society, just like Pakistan.
You've made two important points there. Let me put the first to you, Professor Nandi, then I'll put the economic one to Rahul Jacob. Do you believe that this suggests that the Nobel Peace Prize Committee has an agenda? That's the exact word you used, that there's stereotyping of India happening?
I find it very difficult to believe. Norway is not that central to either India or to the global economic system that they will be that worried about how it will affect India's carpet industry or India's other artisan products. In fact, I would go further and say that irrespective of what the Nobel Committee wants to do or trying to do, according to Swapan, we should ourselves welcome this as a way of drawing attention to this darker side of Indian society and leave the society a little better for the next generation.
So you reject Swapan's assumption or claim or assertion that there is an agenda and there is stereotypical typing happening here?
That doesn't mean that I don't think, I think the Nobel Prize also, like all other such awards, has, if not an agenda, certainly their own biases. That's very clear.
But it's not a bias in this case that you have trouble with?
No, because we can use it much more meaningfully.
Rahul Jacob, let's take up the second point made by Swapan Dasgupta, elaborating on his claim that child labor is, and I'm quoting him, a handle to tar the Made in India label. Swapan Dasgupta writes, the idea is to either black out Indian goods on grounds of unethical practices such as dodgy labor practices or raise the cost of production. Do you think that is part of the motivation behind this award? And therefore, as he says in his last paragraph, or suggests, that it's an attempt to bring India down a notch or two?
To suggest that the Nobel Peace Prize Committee are worried about our manufacturers going to Norway or anywhere else is actually frankly laughable. What this reminds me of is being in Beijing in 2010 when Liu Xiaobo was given the Nobel Peace Prize, and the communist authorities reacted with this sort of tarring of his name and the very idea of democracy. I don't think the Nobel Peace Prize Committee really cared two hoots where our manufacturers go. They'd probably be happier. This is a distraction from what this award was for, which is children's rights and recognizing activists. All this talk of hyphenation is just our super sensitivity to being paired with Pakistan. They were talking about children's rights. Let's not get away from the main issue. That's what this is about.
I'll come back to you in a moment's time, Swapan, but let me first go to Rajiv Kumar. Mr. Kumar, as an economist, as someone who's represented FICCI as Secretary General, how do you view Satyarti's Rugmark or Good Weave initiatives, which certify whether Indian carpets are made with some element of child labor or not? Do you see those two initiatives as good work because they expose child labor, as embarrassing because they reveal the dark truths of India, or as harmful because they could have an adverse impact on exports?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I'm appalled by what Swapan Dasgupta has said. He's a dear friend, and I think to be so defensive as he has been in this statement is actually quite appalling. Because, you know, this child labor thing, as I said, I mean, children working in the firecrackers industry, in the matches industry, in the tobacco industry, in the carpet industry, all of that, I mean, you know, to talk about raising the cost of labor and therefore hurting exports is, I think, it's just indefensible. Indian industry must find ways to raise its productivity and lower its cost of production without recourse to such child labor, because this is the future. And I think to that extent, Mr. Satyarthi has done absolutely glorious work, commendable work, and the government of India must come out with a statement, and the industry too, welcoming what he has done and saying that therefore they would like this to continue until the child labor is completely abolished and no child is found in either homes or factories, but in schools.
Okay. Swapan Dasgupta, do you want to come back in defense? Both Rahul Jacob and Rajiv Kumar were sharply critical of your comments.
Yeah, firstly, to get to Mr. Jacob's issue, let us look at who exactly is this Nobel Committee who decides the Peace Prize. They're not some 10 eminent good people suddenly drawn from various Scandinavian things. They are members of parliament of the Norwegian parliament. It's a committee of the Norwegian parliament. So you have Norwegian politicians, not very lofty people. That is very different from the manner in which the Nobel Committee, Nobel Prize for Physics or for literature or for any other things is given. The Peace Prize is given for a very, very different reason.
Okay.
Which is why Mahatma Gandhi never got the Peace Prize, why Barack Obama got the Peace Prize just because he got elected before he'd done anything, why some Liberian character got something also because they got elected. So there is a great deal of symbolism which is associated with this Peace Prize. So that's the first point. So to talk about that India really getting paranoid about it is not. The Nobel Prize has a certain reputation, perhaps a well-deserved one. But let us not forget that it is not bereft of an agenda. That's the one which even Ashish Nandi admitted. Number two is the question of the economics of it. Rajiv is quite right when he talks about that child labor is really a social evil which must be eradicated. I quite agree with it. But today, the manner in which the European Parliament, the European Union talks about trade, builds in what they call the social agenda. There is, for instance, those who export to the EU will tell you the number of preconditions which are listed down. Exactly, telling you how many toilets there must be, how many something else there. These are non-tariff barriers. These are non-tariff barriers. And
come in, Rajiv Kumar, you want to interrupt?
We cannot argue.
The child labor issue is important, but let us recognize that the EU does impose non-tariff barriers.
All right, Swapan, let Rajiv Kumar, who wants to interrupt you, have a word, and then I want to go to Shireen Miller, who's been patiently waiting. Go ahead, Mr. Kumar.
Swapan, we cannot argue. Swapan, we cannot argue that we would like to have the labor conditions that prevailed in the 19th century and workers be branded as vagrant, etc. Because if you don't do that in the 21st century, these are non-tariff barriers.
But is the EU going to tell us?
I'm not making this a quarrel between the two of you. No, this is not a quarrel between the two of you.
If we don't tell it ourselves, then somebody has to tell us, and we should be.
No, but we have done it ourselves.
Just a moment. Please, let's not make it a quarrel between the two of you. Shireen Miller is there and waiting. Shireen Miller, I want to put to you a sentence from Swapan's article and ask you whether, as the Director of Save the Children, you believe there's any veracity to that comment. Swapan says the award may well turn out to be a booster dose of Western condescension. Is that a correct way of perceiving the award, or is he being churlish?
No, I'm very surprised. I've been listening and tried to listen in the last couple of minutes, but really the problem of child labor, one of the good things about this is that it has raised this issue, you know, this issue that we really don't recognize, and it is one of the gravest exploitation of children, you know, you don't need to talk about exporting products abroad. You know, we have hundreds of thousands of children working as domestic workers, working in brick kilns, working down the mines, you know, in absolutely horrific conditions, and we really shouldn't be having that in this day and age. So I think anything that can be done and can make us recognize that we really do need to start tackling this issue and dealing with it ourselves. We don't need Western parliamentarians or Western corporates or Western people. We should be looking to it ourselves, and whether it is conflict or whether it is child labor, these are two huge issues that stop children from going to school and getting an education, and in my mind that's what this is about.
Let's then come to a second aspect of this award that's attracted controversy, and this time I'll have to admit that both the Business Standard and Swapan Dasgupta seem to be equally concerned about the same issue. First, you, Rahul Jacob. The citation says that it's an important point for a Hindu and a Muslim, an Indian and a Pakistani to join in common struggle. Commenting on that, your paper's leader yesterday said the Nobel Committee has dropped identity and nationalism into a struggle where it should have been absent. Why does your paper object to Malala Yousafzai and Kailash Satyarti's religion and nationality being pointed out and being considered important?
Well, I think the fact that their religion is being pointed out is a rather politically correct and slightly inane point in this context, given that India has the second largest Muslim population in the world. The issue is not that they're Hindu and Muslim, it's that one took on grave risks to study and to campaign for girls to study, and the other has been attacked more than a couple of times, trying to protect children from working in factories and places where they should not be. So again, it comes back to children's rights. It's not really about their nationality or their religion. That's the point we were making.
In contrast to what the Business Standard and its leader said yesterday, the Mail today actually said that there was a delicious irony about the fact that one was Indian, the other was Muslim, one Pakistani, one was Hindu, the other was Muslim. And the delicious irony has to do with the fact that we have a history of Indo-Pakistan relations, as well as the present tensions. And the paper ended by saying, and I'm quoting, the triumph of Malala and Satyarthi could help spur efforts to build a larger constituency for peace. Do you think the Business Standard is correct in objecting to their nationality and religion being identified in the citation, or would you go with the Mail today, who sees a delicious irony given the context and circumstances of today?
I do not agree with the position that one shouldn't have dropped mention of, one should have dropped the mention of religion and nationality, for the simple fact that not only does that do what you were suggesting, that there should be, to sensitize us to this issue, that there is some complementarity involved, but also very importantly, it also points out that both our countries share certain common problems, and perhaps we will gain more from collaborating than by fighting.
So you actually broadly agree with the Mail today line rather than Business Standard?
I do.
Swapan Dasgupta, you comment on this as well. You write, and I'm quoting, if the Nobel Committee reflects on its rationalization of the award, it may realize that many in the subcontinent would find it deeply offensive. First of all, why do you believe that this reference to identity is the main or principal rationalization? Because that's certainly not clear from the citation at all. And secondly, why do you call it offensive as opposed to just unnecessary or irrelevant? Why go all the way to saying it's offensive?
Well, there is the gratuitous Hindu-Muslim reference there. What it basically means and you can talk about it, we can argue about it. Malala Yousafzai was targeted as a woman because there were certain theological issues which were raised by the Taliban on Muslim education. Now, in trying to draw an equivalence and saying, no, we are not really targeting Muslims, what we are doing is we've raised the question of Satyarthi's incidental identity, that of a Hindu. In other words, are we suggesting that child labor is essentially a Hindu problem? It stems something from Hindu theological views?
I don't think the Nobel citation does that at all. I don't think the Nobel citation does that.
This is just going too far.
In its attempt to actually bring it, they always try to bring it.
Well, I'm not sure they do. Let me bring in Rajiv Kumar. Rajiv Kumar, I'm going to
what
first.
What is the commonality between India and Pakistan?
Let me read out. Just a moment, Swapar, hold your peace. Let me read out the citation. Let me read out the citation and then I'll get Rajiv Kumar's comment. Rajiv Kumar, this is what the citation says. The Nobel Committee regards it as an important point for a Hindu and a Muslim, an Indian and a Pakistani to join in a common struggle for education and against extremism. And then the very next sentence says, many other individuals and institutions in the international community have also contributed. Now, do you find that offensive? Or do you find it, as the Mail today said, rather deliciously ironical given the history of tensions between the two countries and the present problem at the moment?
I find it, I agree with Mail today. I mean, because it is ironical that it takes a Nobel Prize committee to point out that India and Pakistan should be improving their relations, should be doing, sort of improving the conditions of their children and the education system. And I don't find it offensive at all. In fact, I think, it has given the opportunity to people like Malala and Satyarthi to issue invitations to Modi and Nawaz Sharif to go and attend their award ceremony, etc. And the fact is that the world would be a better place if India and Pakistan were to forget, their churlishness and come together and create a better environment in the subcontinent. Now, who is at wrong and who is at right is a completely different matter. And as an Indian, I can defend our position. But the fact remains that India and Pakistan must get together and see to it that the environment in the subcontinent improves.
Very quickly, Shireen Miller, because time is our enemy and we're already over. I want to give you the last word. Do you believe that the overall response to Satyarthi's Nobel Peace Prize is conditioned by the fact that we're awkward and embarrassed by child labor? We don't like it when in fact people get awards for pointing out India's failings, and therefore our embarrassment and our awkwardness leads to what some would call a churlish, others would call a defensive response. A quick answer, because we're horribly out of time.
No, I think that people were really surprised probably because they hadn't heard very much about him, and they wouldn't have expected someone working on children's issues and child rights, and especially an issue like child labor, to have got this award. And probably, but I really think the detractors, there may be several reasons that you may think why him and not someone else. But as far as highlighting the issue of child labor and exploitation of children, I think that it's really important to have done so.
A last quick word from you. Are we being churlish as a nation?
I don't know about nation, but I can tell you that but for this Nobel Prize to Satyarthi and Malala, Sopon would not have written the first column on the issue of child labor in his illustrious career.
All right, that's a very pointed comment, and we'll end on that. There we take, it's a wrap on this edition of To The Point, but stay tuned to Headlines today. My colleague Rajiv Sardesai gets you a brand new show on the other side of prime time. But from me, goodbye, good night.